I want you to try a little thought experiment with me today.
Okay.
Picture a hospital room. And I don't mean the movie version with the soft lighting and the emotional music. I mean the real version.
Right. The messy version.
Exactly. Harsh fluorescent lights just humming overhead.
Yeah.
The smell of antiseptic everywhere. It's chaotic. It's loud. And in the middle of all that mess, a child is born.
It's a universal scene, the starting line for basically all of us.
Right. And in that whirlwind, a doctor or a nurse, someone in a uniform, someone with authority, looks at this new squalling human, makes a split-second observation, and ticks a box on a piece of paper. Just a little check mark.
Standard procedure. I mean, it's clerical work.
It is clerical, but I've been reading this piece that suggests that check mark isn't just paperwork. It's more like the first line of a script.
A script.
Yeah, a script that gets handed to you before you can even speak, and the world expects you to just, memorize it and perform it perfectly for the rest of your life.
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying way to frame a birth certificate.
It really is. But that's the vibe of the deep dive today. We are looking at a piece of writing called She in Public by Jaime Hoerricks, Ph.D. Now, I'll be honest, when I first picked this up, I thought it was going to be a standard article about misgendering, which is a huge topic on its own.
Sure.
But this felt totally different. It felt like philosophy wrapped in poetry.
I agree completely. Hoerricks isn't just talking about the social etiquette of pronouns here. This is a meditation on truth.
Yes.
Specifically, the tension between what we call administrative truth, so what the paperwork says, and lived truth, who the person actually is.
And that is exactly where I want to start, because the text opens with that exact hospital scene we just visualized. But Hoerricks doesn't call it a miracle. The text calls it an administrative event.
Yeah.
And then uses this phrase, the ordinary theater of birth.
Theater is such a deliberate word choice there.
It really stuck out to me. Why theater?
Well, think about a theater. You have a stage, you have lighting those fluorescent lights you mentioned, and most importantly, you have an audience and performers. Right. Hoerricks is suggesting that from minute one, we are being observed. The text literally says, a body was observed and interpreted.
Interpreted. That's a tricky word for a medical setting, isn't it?
How so?
Well, usually we think of doctors as just reporting facts.
Yeah.
You don't interpret a broken leg.
Right.
It's either broken or it isn't.
In a strictly biological sense, sure. But Hoerricks is looking at this through a sociological lens. The argument here is that the doctor isn't just looking at biology. They are assigning a social category.
Ah, okay.
They look at the physical attributes and immediately map them onto a massive pre-existing social structure, male or female, pink or blue.
And once that mapping happens, the text says, that interpretation was recorded. The record hardened.
The record hardened. That is the key moment right there.
I paused there for a while when I was reading. Hardened. It sounds like concrete setting. Like
once that ink is dry, the flexibility is just gone.
Exactly.
But it's not just that the flexibility is gone, it's that the record becomes more real than the person. This is what we call administrative truth. Once that box is ticked, it becomes a legal reality. It becomes the doctrine that schools, governments, and strangers will use to define you forever.
The text actually says the hardening was mistaken for truth. That's a heavy accusation. It's saying we confused the map for the territory.
That is a perfect analogy. The birth certificate is the map. The human being is the territory. But society loves the map.
Because the map is clean.
Exactly. The map doesn't change. The territory, the person is messy and fluid and complicated. So when there's a conflict between the map and the land, society usually insists the map is right and the land is wrong.
Which is wild when you actually think about it. It's like society saying, I have this piece of paper from 40 years ago that says you are X, so you must be X regardless of what you're telling me right now.
That is the essence of the conflict Hoerricks is describing. It's the authority of the archive versus the authority of the voice.
So we have this origin story, the first entry, as the author calls it. But here's the thing that surprised me. The piece isn't really about the past.
No, it's not.
It's not a memoir about growing up. Hoerricks pivots pretty hard to the present day.
Right. The text says, what interests me now is not the first entry, which makes total sense. You can't unring a bell, and you can't untick a box from decades ago.
The author is interested in what's happening right now. And there's this metaphor used, the persistence of the echo.
I love this metaphor.
Help me unpack it. Why an echo?
Well, think about what an echo actually is. It's a sound that continues after the original source has stopped.
Right.
The original source was that doctor in the hospital room saying, it's a boy. That moment is over. It's gone. But the sound of it, that is still bouncing off the walls of the author's life today.
And where does that echo happen? It's not in the hospital anymore. The text moves us to the most boring places imaginable.
Yes, car parks, corridors, waiting in line for coffee.
The ordinary theater of daily life. It's so mundane.
It is.
And I think that makes it sadder, in a way. If this was a big dramatic confrontation in a courtroom, it would feel entirely different. But we're talking about buying a latte, and the echo sounds like, "Hey, mister," or "Excuse me, sir."
Those short, sharp, everyday addresses.
See, this is where I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Because if I'm standing in line at a coffee shop and someone says, "Excuse me, sir," to someone else, I don't hear violence. I hear politeness. I hear someone trying to be respectful.
And you're not wrong. On the surface, that is the tragedy of it. The person saying sir isn't trying to be cruel. They are trying to be polite.
Right.
But Hoerricks is asking us to look at the impact, not just the intent. For the author, that sir is the echo of the administrative error from birth. It's the world reminding them the paper says you are this.
Oh, man. It's like a paper cut that keeps getting reopened every single time you go to the grocery store.
Precisely. And it's constant. It's relentless. But here is where the text gets really smart. Hoerricks doesn't get angry at the guy in the car park.
No, surprisingly not.
The text explicitly states, these are not philosophical statements.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning, the guy in the parking lot isn't making a grandstand about gender theory. He isn't looking at Hoerricks and thinking, I am going to enforce the gender binary today.
So what is he doing then?
He's engaging in a reflex.
A reflex, like when the doctor hits your knee with that little hammer and your leg just kicks out automatically?
That is exactly the comparison. It's automatic. It's bypassing the thinking part of the brain entirely.
Yeah.
The text calls it social shorthand.
Social shorthand. Okay, I get that. We're all busy. We're all rushing around. We don't have time to have a deep philosophical interview with every single stranger we pass on the sidewalk.
No.
So we use shorthand.
We have to. The human brain is a processing machine. We are bombarded with visual data every second. To survive, we categorize things instantly, safe or dangerous, friend or foe, man or woman.
It's just efficiency.
It is efficiency. But Hoerricks argues that this efficiency has a huge cost. When we run on autopilot, when we rely on shorthand, we stop seeing the actual person in front of us.
We're just reacting to cues.
Exactly. We are just reacting to a set of physical cues.
And this brings us to the part of the text that really blew my mind. Because Hoerricks stops being a poet for a second and starts acting like a computer scientist. The text talks about an algorithm.
The social algorithm. This, for me, is the core aha moment of the entire piece.
Because usually when we talk about algorithms, we're complaining about social media showing us ads for things we talked about once.
Right.
But Hoerricks says we are the ones running the software.
Yes, we are the hardware. The conditioning we receive is the software.
The text actually gives us the formula. It's an equation. Let's break it down. The inputs are height plus breadth.
Visual cues. Hoerricks describes herself as a tall woman. Broad shoulders, taking up space.
So input A is height, input B is breadth, and then there's a third variable, decades of binary conditioning.
That is the massive database we all carry around in our heads. Since we were toddlers, we have been taught, conditioned, really, that bodies come in two shapes. Big, tall, broad equals man. Small, curvy, soft equals woman. That is the conditioning.
So the brain sees a tall figure in a car park. It takes that visual data, runs it through the binary conditioning database, and what's the output?
The output is he, sir, mister.
And how fast does this happen?
Real time. The text emphasizes that it happens in the split second before speech. You see a shape, the algorithm runs, the result pops up, and you say, "Excuse me, sir," before you have even consciously registered the person's face.
That is terrifyingly mechanical.
It is. It strips the humanity out of the interaction. It reduces a human being to a math problem. Height plus breadth equals sir.
There's a line in the text that I underlined 3 times. Hoerricks calls this process pattern recognition masquerading as knowledge.
Yes. That is the sentence that anchors the whole argument for me.
Masquerading as knowledge. I really want to dig into that. Because isn't pattern recognition a form of knowledge?
How do you mean?
Well, if I see dark clouds and I think rain, that's pattern recognition. And it's usually right. That's knowledge, isn't it?
That's useful data, sure. If you see stripes in the tall grass, you think tiger, and you run. That pattern recognition keeps you alive. But here's the difference. A tiger is always a tiger. A cloud is always a cloud. Human beings are infinitely more complex.
So when we apply that same tiger logic to people,
We fail. We think we know someone's gender because we recognized a pattern. Tall means man. We feel certainty. We feel like we have knowledge.
but we don't.
No, we just have a reflex. That's why it's a masquerade. It's a costume of certainty worn over a guess.
That distinction is huge.
Right.
It's the difference between actually knowing something and just assuming it because it looks familiar.
Exactly. And the problem is, we trust the masquerade. We trust our eyes, or rather, we trust the shortcut our brain took. We don't stop to ask, wait, is this pattern actually applicable here?
This circles back to that term narrative sovereignty. I'll admit, when you mentioned that in the intro, it sounded a bit academic to me. But now that we've broken down the algorithm, it makes total sense.
Think of it as story ownership.
Right. Because if the world is constantly running this algorithm on you height plus breadth equals sir, then the world is writing your story for you. It's telling you who you are.
And narrative sovereignty is the act of taking the pen back. It's the refusal to let the algorithm define you.
Hoerricks describes her life as the quiet act of amending the record in flesh and voice.
Amending the record. Notice how we are back to administrative language.
But the tools aren't paper and pen anymore. It's flesh and voice.
It's incredibly physical. It means showing up. It means speaking. Every time Hoerricks corrects someone or just exists in public as herself, she is trying to overwrite that bad code. She is trying to disrupt the algorithm.
That sounds exhausting, though. Just living your life as a constant act of amending the record.
It is exhausting. Think about the friction of that. Every interaction in a coffee shop potentially becomes a moment where you have to assert your own reality against someone else's autopilot.
It makes me wonder how much of our day-to-day life is just us hallucinating other people. That's a provocative question.
No, seriously. If I'm looking at someone and I'm just seeing height plus breadth, am I actually seeing them? Or am I just projecting my own internal database onto them?
In many cases, you are projecting. You aren't interacting with the individual. You are interacting with your own expectations. You are interacting with the hardening that happened in your own mind years ago.
We're just bumping into each other's algorithms out there.
Until we make a conscious choice to stop. And I think that is the hidden invitation in this text. It's not just a complaint about being misgendered. It's a challenge to the reader and to us to turn off the autopilot.
To disable the algorithm, or at least pause it.
Pause it. Create a gap between the visual input and the verbal output.
That's hard to do. Reflexes are fast. They are. But notice the difference it would make. If you see someone who is tall and broad, and your brain shouts, "Mister," can you catch that? Can you hold it back for just 1 second and actually look at the person?
Look for the human, not the category.
Ideally, yes. We are born, as Hoerricks says, as a human child, not a category. The category is something we drape over people later, and sometimes it's a heavy, suffocating drape.
It's interesting because the text is so personal to the author's experience of being a tall woman, but the lesson applies to everyone. We do this with everything: race, age, clothes.
We absolutely do. We are constantly pattern matching. Suit equals rich. Hoodie equals dangerous. Gray hair equals frail. It's all pattern recognition masquerading as knowledge. It's all a shortcut that denies people their complexity.
So we've gone from the theater of birth, that sterile room with the fluorescent lights where the record was hardened,
To the echo in the car park where that old record keeps playing on a loop.
and we've taken apart the machine, the social algorithm that keeps that loop running. Height plus breadth plus conditioning.
And we've identified the glitch. The fact that our knowledge is often just a reflex in a costume.
It really changes how I think about that ticked box. It's not just a piece of paper in a dusty file cabinet. It's alive. It's walking around with us.
It is doctrine until we challenge it, until we decide that the person standing in front of us has more authority than the expectation in our heads.
Narrative sovereignty. The right to be the author of your own life, not just a character in someone else's script.
Beautifully put.
So here is where we leave you today. We've unpacked the source, but the real work happens when you take your headphones off.
It happens in the ordinary theater.
Exactly. The next time you're in a grocery store or a parking lot or waiting for a bus, look at the strangers around you and catch yourself.
Catch that split second where your brain assigns them a label.
Feel the algorithm kicking in. Feel that height plus breadth calculation running in the background. And ask yourself, am I seeing this person? Or am I just checking a box?
Are you seeing the territory or are you just reading the map?
It's a small pause. But it might just be the difference between an echo and the truth.
And that is a difference worth making.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. It's been a heavy one, but I think a necessary one.
Indeed. Be aware of your shorthand.
We'll catch you in the next deep dive.